Hi, welcome to Storytime with Ken. Be sure to subscribe to my channel so you can be there for all the story times. This week, I thought it would be fun to do a romance. Now, I'm not an expert on romance books, but luckily the librarian made a great recommendation. So this week, we'll be reading Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. Okay, and this book is so popular, it has a hit TV series based on it, so I am super excited to see what this is about. So let's start by reading the back summary, just to get a flavor for it. Here we go. Scottish Highlands, 1945. Claire Randall, a former British combat nurse, is just back from the war and reunited with her husband on a second honeymoon when she walks through a standing stone in one of the ancient circles that dot the British Isles. Suddenly, she's a Sassenach, an outlander in a Scotland torn by war and raiding clans in the year of our Lord, 1743. Whoa, she went back in time. This is great. I love time travel. Okay. Amid danger, passion, and violence, her only chance of safety lies in Jamie Fraser, a gallant young Scots warrior. All right. I can see how this could be romance, right? You got Claire, maybe Jamie. Let's dig in and find out. Okay, let's find a good scene to sample this. All right. Okay. Well, this is back in old Scotland, and it looks like Claire eyes Jamie from across the street. Let's see what happens. This is Claire. I eyed the broad back and muscular forearms as he lifted the heavy box with little apparent effort. Mr. McTavish, I began hesitantly. There was no response. The comely face did not change expression. The wide mouth stayed relaxed. The blue eyes focused on the strap he was fastening. Jamie, I tried again, a little louder, and he looked up at once. So it really wasn't McTavish. I wondered what it was. He said. You're, quite sizable, aren't you? I asked. A half smile curved his lips, and he nodded, clearly wondering what I was up to. Big enough for most things, he said. I was encouraged and moved casually closer so as not to be overheard by the onlookers from the square. And tolerably strong fingers? I asked. He flexed one hand and his smile widened. Aye, that's so. Happen you have a few chestnuts you want cracked? He asked. He looked down at me with a shrewd and merry glint. I glanced briefly past him to see the knot of people in the square. More like one to be pulled from the fire. I looked up to meet the questioning blue gaze. Could you do it? He stood looking down at me for a moment, still smiling, then shrugged. Aye, if the shank's long enough to grip. Can you draw the crowd away, though? Interference wouldn't be looked on kindly, and me a stranger. Wow. Man, seems like there's a lot of tension going on there. All right, let's see what's going to happen. I think I know what's going to happen, but actually, they just got married. So let's skip to the wedding night. Why not? Okay, so this is Claire in her room after the wedding reception. I sat on the bed, stiff and terrified in my borrowed finery. There was a faint noise as the heavy door of the room swung open, and then shut, slam. Jamie was leaning at the door, watching me. The air of embarrassment between us deepened. It was Jamie who broke the silence first. You dinna need to be afraid of me, he said. I wasn't gonna jump on you. I laughed in spite of myself. Well, I didn't think that you would. In fact, I didn't think he would touch me until and unless I invited him to. The fact remained, I was going to have to invite him to do considerably more than that, and soon. I eyed him dubiously. I suppose it would be harder if I found him unattractive. In fact, the opposite was true. I cleared my throat and patted the bed beside me. Would you like to sit down? Aye. He came across the room, moving like a big cat. Instead of sitting beside me, though, he pulled up a stool and sat down facing me. Somewhat tentatively, he reached out and took my hands between his own. They were large, blunt-fingered, very warm. The back slightly furred with reddish hairs. I felt a slight shock at the touch, and I thought of an Old Testament passage, for Jacob's skin was smooth, while his brother Esau was a hairy man. Frank, my other husband's hands were long and slender, nearly hairless and very aristocratic looking. I had always loved watching them as he lectured. Tell me about your husband, said Jamie, as though he'd been reading my mind. I almost jerked my hands away in shock. Well, I think that's a great start to the wedding night. We'll give him a little privacy and move on, shall we? Okay. Yes, violence. Here. Oh, okay. So a little bit later on, you can't have a relationship without a few bumps in the road, right? So here's a moment when Claire has to be honest and tell Jamie when she's from. Let's see what happens. Let's see if he can handle it. Do you know when I was born? I asked, looking up. I knew my hair was wild and my eyes staring, but I didn't care. On the 20th of October, in the year of our Lord, 1918. Do you hear me? He was looking at me, blinking, unmoving, as if listening to nothing I said. I said 1918, nearly 200 years from now. Do you hear? I was shouting now, and he nodded slowly. I hear, he said softly. Yes, you hear, I blazed. And you think I'm raving mad, don't you? Admit it. You have to think that. That's exactly what you think. There isn't any other way you can explain me to yourself. You have to think that. You can't believe me. You can't dare to. Oh, Jamie. All this time spent hiding the truth, realizing I could never tell anyone. Now I realized I could tell my beloved Jamie, my husband, the man that I trusted beyond all others. And he couldn't believe me either. The hairs on his arm shone, stiff as copper wires in the firelight, though, and I realized that they stood erect, like the bristles on a dog. Oh, he was afraid of me. Jamie, I said, feeling my heart break with absolute loneliness. Oh, Jamie. I sat down and curled myself up into a ball, trying to roll around the core of my pain. Nothing mattered any longer, and I sobbed my heart out. I believe you, he said firmly. I do not understand it a bit, not yet, but I believe you, Claire. I believe you. Listen to me. There's truth between us, you and I. Whatever you tell me, I shall believe it. He gave me a gentle shake. I was still sobbing, unable to grasp what he was telling me. I struggled, trying to pull away, but he gathered me up and held me tightly against himself, pushing my head into the folds of his plaid and repeating over and over again, I believe you. At last, from sheer exhaustion, I grew calm enough to look up and say, but you can't believe me. He smiled down at me. His mouth trembled slightly, but he smiled. You'll no tell me what I canna do, Sassenach. He paused a moment. How old are you? Now there's a scene of love. She's bearing her soul, telling him that she's from the future, and he's admitting he doesn't even know how old his wife is. So I think that's love. Anyway, this looks like a great book. Looks like that couple's off to a great start. And everyone, go down and check out Outlander at your local library. I'll see you next time.